If you don't want to be recorded, by the way, I guess like we'll upload this to YouTube, but I guess we can cut it off at the beginning. But if you don't want to have your face appear as part of this recording, then just turn off your camera and we'll make sure that it's not there.
Okay, I don't mind, but I won't be looking at the camera at all, just so everybody knows.
All right. Okay, we can see your screen, Madison. This is good.
Okay, great.
See a big old screen of on the yes, and now it's all just full screen React for beginners. See if the digital workshop. So it looks great.
This is already getting so much better than last week.
Indeed. So without further ado, Madison, take it away.
Thank you. So we're here for the React for Beginners workshop. I kind of created this workshop as a very simple entry point for anyone who's never seen React before, but maybe has a little bit of technical knowledge. So next slide. About me. My name is Madisen Whitfield. I'm originally from the state of Oregon on the west coast of the United States. I moved to Sweden in 2014, first as an au pair in the Stockholm area, and then I started university in Gothenburg. And that leads me to my qualifications. I have a bachelor's degree in software engineering and management from the University of Gothenburg, and I've been working as a software developer for almost 5 years, and a little bit less than half of that time was spent mostly working with React. And you might be wondering why qualifications is in quotation marks. That's because I really believe that anyone can learn how to program. You don't need a degree to be qualified. And so I'm excited to be able to share all this with you guys today. So for my hobbies, I like to roller skate, and I'm starting to look into cloud-based development as a side project. And finally, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. The more the merrier there. So, okay, today's agenda. We'll be going over what React actually is. I'll explain a little bit more about the origins and the ideas behind its creation. And then why we use React. I'm going to explain its strengths and benefits. In section 3, we'll dive into how it works. So I'll try to explain the basic technical concepts that sort of define how React can be used. And then in section 4, I'll go over the context in which React is used. So like when would React be a good option for creating a user interface, for example. And then in section 5, I'll do a quick demo where I'll show you guys how to set up a project in React using Visual Studio Code as the editor. And if there are people that would like to follow along at home, I'll try to take the section at like a slower pace. And then for section 6, I will provide you guys with some more resources on where you can learn about React, including the ones that I found most helpful when I was a beginner. And then in the end, a Q&A for any questions you might have. And I guess the last thing is I'm going to explain some terms that everyone might be familiar with, but for others, there might be some new vocabulary. So I just want to make sure that everyone's getting as much out of this as possible. So yeah, if there's any terms you don't understand or anything, just feel free to stop and I'll try to explain. So what is React? React is a JavaScript library. Although React is sometimes called a framework, it's actually an efficient and flexible JavaScript library for building user interfaces. React is written in JavaScript as well, and it was created at Facebook in 2011 in order to break down complex user interfaces into reusable isolated code bits called components for building web applications. And I'll go more into detail about components in section 3. So, does everybody know what a library is?
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
Okay.
I do. So, yes.
Okay, good. Then I won't need to explain that.
Cool.
So React is declarative, efficient, and component-based. So what does that mean? Declarative, in really simple terms, means that React is called declarative because we write the code stating what the task or desired outcome we want is, and React is in charge of taking our declared code and performing all the JavaScript steps in order to get us the desired result. So it makes your code more predictable and easier to debug that way. It's efficient because when you have a React page and the data on the page changes or is updated, React will efficiently update and render just the right components when your data changes instead of rendering and reloading everything on the page. And it's component based. So you can build encapsulated components that manage their own data and then compose them to make complex UIs, kind of like a bento box. You can just like take the components you want, stick them together, and it comes out with a page. React is also very popular. Looking at different metrics like GitHub, stars, library usage, NPM trends, and most used web frameworks, React as a front-end library is still by far a front runner in the field compared to its competitors. React also has a very high job demand. In 2021, job openings looking for React developers were far higher than the amount compared to other front-end libraries. So React jobs were 3.5 times more popular than jQuery, 4 times more popular than Angular, and 7 times more popular than Vue. So why do we use React? So Facebook pioneered the development of React as a JavaScript library to support development of their user interfaces. At first, it was an internal tool, but now it's open source and free for public use. React is composable, first of all, meaning that when we develop in React, we combine parts or elements to form a whole. This is where the components come in. In the early days of React web development, a website was usually a single HTML page, and those web pages ended up being very long with thousands of lines of HTML code. And modern libraries like React allow us to divide those thousands of lines up and put them in custom components that we can then utilize and integrate into one place, making the code a lot more maintainable and flexible. It's declarative. So in React, the DOM, or the document object model, which I'll explain later, is declarative. We can make interactive UIs by changing the state or data of the component, and React takes care of updating the DOM accordingly. And in terms of efficiency, React handles high rates of data change very well. For example, lots of people commenting on a post or likes being generated without even having to reload the page. One way it does this is via the virtual DOM, which I'll explain later. But for now, what is important to know is that React updates only the components whose data has changed instead of having to reload the whole page when new data is introduced. This means that we never interact directly with the DOM. React takes care of the UI updates when there are changes in the page's data, and that makes the code more predictable and easier to debug. Also, if one action needs to affect several other areas, then React will do it for you in a manner similar to what I just said, basically making changes wherever necessary without affecting or refreshing the other areas. So write once, learn anywhere. What does that mean? It means you can develop new features in React without rewriting the existing code. And it can also power mobile apps using React Native. So you can create iOS, Android, and web applications simultaneously. So it supports extensive reusability. And it's simple and easy to learn, and easy to use. The component-based approach, automatic rendering, and the use of plain JavaScript make React very simple to learn, build applications, both web and mobile, and support them. It contains pre-built patterns and functions that can be chosen and combined, like building blocks to create fast, visually appealing, and scalable projects in less time compared to designing the entire application line by line. And React only requires a basic knowledge of HTML and CSS fundamentals in order to start working with it, as well as JavaScript, of course. React also has very strong community support on platforms like YouTube and Stack Overflow. So it's pretty easy to troubleshoot if you have an issue, because you can usually just Google your problem and find a usable solution. Also, JSX helps make this easy to learn. JSX stands for JavaScript XML, which is Extensible Markup Language. Not that important to know, but it's a special syntax that sort of mixes JavaScript and HTML and makes React even easier to grasp and work with. And React is flexible. So React.js lets you use JavaScript and other JavaScript libraries the way you want. React can also be used along with other frameworks and libraries such as jQuery, Angular, Backbone, etc. If what React offers isn't sufficient for what you want to do. And of course, React is component-based, which makes development of reusable and modular code that is easy to test very simple. Finally, it's SEO friendly. Search engine optimization is about making it easier for developers to find the right content for the users. And when a user makes a search, engine platforms like Google try to find pages that are the most relevant to that search. React affects the search engine optimization by giving you a single page application, which requires JavaScript to show the content on the page, which can then be rendered and indexed. So basically, when you search for something in Google, if your application is in React, Google scans the whole page to see if anything on your React page matches what has been searched in the search bar. And it might sound like I'm throwing a lot of concepts at you right now, but I want you to remember that React is designed to be easy to use. It doesn't have a high learning curve, so it's pretty simple to get started with development. And I've seen online that 1 hour should be sufficient to like solve a simple task and get started with development. And I guess we'll put that to the test and see about that later. But I just want to check in real quick and see how you guys are doing. Is it going too fast? Too slow?
We have a question.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, we're doing fine, by the way. But one question is, so it's more easy than it sounds. And I have that question as well, because I feel like a lot of people seem to struggle with it. But
I think it's easier than it sounds, but the thing is that, well, it's easier than I made it sound, definitely. Because I just thrown out like a bunch of different technical terminology, but I think that because React can be used to do a lot of different things, and a lot of people are using React in different ways, that can make it seem more tricky than it is, especially for new people who are trying to learn the basics.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. It's one of those things where like if you tried to develop a front end and do the things that you would want to do with React, and if you want to build a front end and then you have like repeatable components, so like you take a bunch of data and you want to list it because it's like a bunch of items on a blog, or you want to have like reusable components and things, you often find like you're repeating a lot of code, or you're repeating different patterns. And then if you're using existing like JavaScript like systems like jQuery or whatever that are updating the DOM, your pages end up being slow and sluggish, and it all just ends up kind of like choking up both this, like the website that you're trying to build and your development process. And once you feel like that pain, that's when like you go to React, and it's sort of it takes a little bit of like inverted thinking about how you work with web development, which I'm sure Madisen will go into, of like how you use like JavaScript to update the DOM and this virtual DOM thing in the basic concepts. But yeah, it's one of those things where like this stuff can be really, really difficult, and React does actually make it super easy to do quite advanced things, or what don't seem like advanced things in React, but are actually, if you try to do it with React, it's so painful and it's so hard. So in that regard, it is like really easy, but sometimes it takes like a little thinking and a bit of a learning curve just to get to the point. But once you're there, it's like, oh, this is a breeze. We have a couple more. It seems the flexibility allows for it to be used in many different ways. That brings complexity. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess as Madisen will go into some of the basic concepts, just the basics of React are like actually pretty simple. So, and then
that's true.
Once you get into like the wider problems, it can be, that's where the extra bits come in. So,
and sorry, then I think, no, it's okay. I was going to say that, and then I think when it comes to complexity and flexibility, React was very trendy at one point. And in the tech industry, when things are trendy, sometimes companies want to jump on the bandwagon and use the new technology just because they could, when it's not necessarily the best way to go for what they're trying to build.
Yeah, that is the software engineering. That is a software engineering mantra if I've ever heard one. Well, like let's use this shiny new thing because people have told us it's good, rather than actually being fit for purpose.
Right now, it's let's put everything on the cloud.
I think as a cloud engineer, I'm gonna.
Okay, well, know your audience, right?
No, I mean, like, actually, I've been working over the past couple of weeks with some people who don't do stuff in the cloud, and their use cases are very, actually, a good example of not doing something on the cloud that actually works probably as good as it would work on the cloud, if not better. But anyway, but it's not about that. So we did have another question, but I want a little bit more clarification from Sebastian around like safety of data, but we can come back to that a little later.
Okay.
So sorry, continue.
No worries.
Basic concepts.
So, yep. Now, section 3, how does it work? And we're going to go through the basic concepts. I'm going to try to avoid getting too technical, but we'll see how that goes. So, yes, first a little bit of vocabulary and then the concepts. So first we have JSX, which stands for JavaScript Extensible Markup Language. It's a markup language. No, wait, sorry, the name. A markup language is a set of codes or tags that describes the text in a digital document. The most famous markup language, I would say, is hypertext markup language, or what we know as HTML, which is used to format web pages. JSX is a syntax extension to JavaScript, allowing the user to couple rendering logic with other UI logic instead of separating them. In a plain JavaScript front-end application, you would have JavaScript in its own section that would be used for the functionality of the application, and then HTML in its own file to describe how the text on the page should look, kind of. And then with JSX, you can combine them in a sense. So then we have a quote here. Instead of artificially separating technologies by putting markup and logic in separate files, React separates concerns with loosely coupled units called components that contain both. And React doesn't require using JSX, but most people find it helpful as a visual aid when working with UI inside the JavaScript code. And then have a little example here. So on the left, we have, I think, plain JavaScript. On the right and at the bottom, that's HTML. And then in the middle is JSX. You can kind of see how they're combined.
Cool.
Yeah. And then now we move on to single page application. Usually when you see this referenced in any sort of documentation, it's written as SPA or SPA, which is why I have the little lady in the spa on the picture. But single page application is a web application or website that interacts with the user by dynamically rewriting the current web page with new data from a web server instead of the default method, which would be reloading entire new pages. This means the user gets faster transitions that make the website feel more like a native app or like a mobile app on your phone. In a single page application, the page refresh never occurs. Instead, all of the necessary HTML, JavaScript, and CSS code is either retrieved by the browser with the single page load and or the appropriate resources are dynamically loaded and added to the page as necessary, usually in response to user actions. So if we use the commenting on a post example from before, as new comments come in, instead of reloading the entire page, just the component with the comments would be getting the new data and updating. So this is a natural segue to briefly talking about the virtual DOM. And DOM stands for the Document Object Model. When you render, or in other words, allow a component to be seen on a page using React, it stores the state of the DOM tree structure, which is basically the component layout. And I included this picture here so that you can kind of see that it's like a tree structure. So here you have the document and then the root element, which is, I guess you can say, the base of what you're doing and what you're working off of. And then you have other elements like the head and the body, and then inside the head you would have a title, and inside the body you would have headings and references, links, or whatever. But it's sort of in that like hierarchy. And when there are any updates to be made to the page, the document object model compares the, oh wait, sorry. Okay, let me just start this part over. So basically, when you render, the document object model state is stored, which is basically just saving the component layout and the component structure so that when there are any updates to be made to the page, the document object model compares the current or updated version to the previously saved version and updates only the parts that have changed. So that saves a lot of potential page refreshes. And the virtual DOM system improves performance significantly.
Nice. Yeah. So I think I guess, just to add into this on that regard, is that this sort of links back to what I mentioned earlier around like the jQuery sort of system. So if you used pre-React sort of libraries and things to help you do some of this clever composable elements and things, you would often use a library called jQuery or other similar libraries that would do lots of updates to the actual document object model that's running in your browser, the real document object model, not the virtual one, not a virtual one that React creates. And that is super expensive on like how long it takes to update it, and like how much like CPU like time and processing it takes. I say super expensive. It's still like milliseconds, but when you're doing it 10 times over lots and lots of times because you want to render lots of different bits and pieces of your page, it all adds up into like multiple seconds of loading and your page chugging. So yeah, in terms of this performance of being able to update it, just like keeping a virtual DOM and then just updating just doing one of these expensive DOM calls every once in a while, or every time that something changes, and only changing what has been changed. Yeah, as Madisen says, it's massive improvement. Sorry to jump in there.
No, that's great, actually. Yeah, thank you. So next we have components. I think this is the fun part. So we've talked about components a little bit all over in the presentation, but just to summarize and kind of expand, components in React allow you to split the UI into independent and reusable pieces and think about each piece in isolation. A component can be anything in your web application, like a button or text or a label, or a grid. And you can even create custom components using React. So here we have an example, and oh, it's on the wrong computer. Okay, so here we have an example, and like each of these bubbles is one component. So this blue one is its own component with the search fields and a little button here. And then like these headers for sporting goods and electronics could be a component. You only need one component, but then you can give it different values. So this one has the title sporting goods and this one has electronics, but functionally it's the same component. You're just reusing it for a different purpose. And then same with the ones in red. But then you can also take this table, and this can be a component, this green table for number 3. And then you can reuse that if you want to. So they're kind of stackable and reusable in any way that you could imagine or want to use them.
So I guess they're like templates in that regard. So like they define a template of how something should look, and then you just use that template whenever you need it and plug in some data, right?
Exactly.
Cool.
Yep, and I'll try to give you guys a little demo later. A very simple explaining, or a very simple demo, but hopefully it helps, so you can see like how we make it and then the output that it creates as well.
Cool.
So conceptually, components are like JavaScript functions. If you guys know a little bit about JavaScript, they accept some inputs called props and then return React elements describing what should appear on the screen. So here's a small example of a component system, I guess, a few different components here. So we have a header, a main content, and a footer. And here where they're being rendered, you can see oops, each component is there, the header content, the main content, and the footer content. And then as they're rendered, they display like this on the page that you can see in the right image there.
So this, and then this stuff where it's like H2, hey, like that stuff written directly in the JavaScript is what you meant by the JSX stuff, right?
Exactly. Well,
cool.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. That's kind of JavaScript. But this part in the div is sort of more JSX.
Yeah, well, like
at the bottom.
Yeah, so like I guess if you wanted to just write this as like native JavaScript, all of the
Right.
all of like the I think when you're wanting to write like h2 hey with the in like for example in the header content function, if you wanted to write that in just native JavaScript, I think it's like you have to write
you have to specify script and then
you have to do like react.create component h2 with content hey and then like that bundles up as a thing, whereas the JS makes it like way more readable.
Very true. And by the way, can you guys see my mouse?
Yes, we can. It's very small, but we can.
Okay, I just assumed you could see it, so
yeah,
good. I will try to be more descriptive.
So Jonathan just says, so you can write HTML and CSS as the return of a JS function, basically. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that is pretty sweet.
A couple of questions just from the chat. So how important is the semicolon at the end of the statement? So
that's a good question. The semicolons are important, but it depends on where they are. So typically, I don't see any semicolons here.
Yeah, I think the only one is at the import statement.
Yeah, that one's important.
Yeah, from my memory with JavaScript is that for a lot of things, like the semicolon isn't actually that important because the JavaScript like interpreter that's built into browsers is smart enough to be able to not need them. But it's often good practice to put them there anyway. It kind of depends on who you talk to or what sort of style system.
I think that's true. Everyone has a different like coding style.
Yeah. So in that regards, like it kind of depends. It's not, strictly speaking, it's not important. Some people will tell you it's good practice. Some people will say it's just, it makes things cleaner without them. Okay. Another question.
In my experience, if they're in the wrong place, things just don't work how they're supposed to. So
yes, that's also very true. And then Lucas just says as sort of a statement, but kind of asking it as a question, which is so I guess compartmentalization is what makes this library so great.
I would say so. Part of what makes it great, definitely.
Yeah. And then a final question just for now is Andrew asks that like these React components must have a defined like interface to the outside world or to when you're wanting to use them, right?
Sorry, can you say that again? They must have a defined interface?
They must have a defined interface to the outside world. So I guess I guess what Andrew's saying here is that like your header content component here, like you must have some sort of like defined way of saying like
up here.
this is how the component these are what the properties of the component must take to be able to render it and things like that. So
yes, so basically anything that is not in the render section at the end here would not show up. So if you would erase the main content line, for example, then you would just see on the page hey and goodbye for the header and the footer.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I hope so.
Me too.
Sebastian just says the only must is indentation, which I think so. Well, it's not actually required.
It's not even a must, but it makes everything so much more readable.
Yes, please indent things properly.
Yeah, please.
And then a very final quick question from Jonathan is, so the error handling, it must be more fluid, like HTML versus strict JS errors. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Jonathan.
Okay, while you clarify, I just need to run and grab my computer charger quickly.
Yeah, sure, no worries.
My apologies. I'll be right back.
associate fluid like HTML. Jonathan, like, could you like, I don't know, possibly word it? I'm not sure exactly.
I guess I'm a learner. I guess my question was, so I guess with HTML there isn't as strict of like syntax error, that throwing syntax errors like in JS. Like if you miss, I don't know, a semicolon somewhere, it throws you a syntax error in it. And I remember learning with HTML, it seemed to be less like that with the indentations and such. So, but now it's like kind of a weird combination. So I guess I'm confused with like, what does it follow?
Yeah, so I would say with JS, like, yeah, depending on like, it'll still be under the same syntax as JS, because all of this, strictly speaking, is all still JavaScript. The JSX part is like pretty much just like helpful syntax. So when you're actually building your React application, before you go and send this code that we have here, like the header content and everything, to someone's browser to try and run, like the browser doesn't understand how to read JSX. So you have to put it through like a not quite a compiling step, more like a transpiling step, where you convert things from JavaScript with JSX into pure JavaScript. That is the thing that actually gets sent to that actually gets packaged up and sent to the client browser as part of your like web server or anything. So really, like, a lot of the error handling there, a lot of like the more like compilation errors and things where you're being told, oh, you're missing a semicolon or you're missing such and such, can actually be caught much earlier because of this transpilation step of like, we've got sort of JavaScript with sort of HTML code built into it with this JSX, but if it's not going to like go through this sort of transpilation step, then you'll get notified about that by like whatever transpiler you're using, which is usually Babel. I think most people use. It's like another library. Yeah, no worries.
Super.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, that's all the questions that I can see in the chat. So
okay.
Let's continue.
Oops. Okay, now I move on to props. So props is essentially the name for data that is passed to the component functions. One thing that's important to know is props are read-only, meaning that a function or class cannot modify its own props. It can only use them. So here, in the welcome function at the top of the page, you see props is passed to the function, and then they're used after this hello, where they're specified as like props.name. So later, you would use the welcome function and then pass a name in as the prop. So then it would later read out like, hello, Madison, hello, Matt, hello, Brittany, hello, whoever. And I'll give an example of this as well in the demo, so I'll hopefully be able to explain it better. But then later here in the sum function and the withdrawal function, the sum function is an example of a prop that I guess is pure because it doesn't change the inputs.
Yeah,
but
it's a pure function. It doesn't have any side effects. It just does a thing and then returns it.
Exactly. Then the withdrawal function is attempting to change the data before it's returned, kind of.
Yeah. So in this case, yeah, the withdraw function is not a pure function because, or well, it is. It's a. Is it a pure function? No, it isn't. It's got a side effect in that, yeah, it's changing the it's changing the like account, which I guess depending on which functional programmer you would talk to might actually depend on whether it's a pure function or not, because they could say, well, the function's purpose is to change the amount of from the account total. So, and that is its only effect, and it doesn't have any other side effects. So it'd be pure in that sense. But I think the point here is that like props are read only, and you should keep them as pure read only.
Exactly.
Yeah. Please tell me to shut the hell up. By the way. If I'm like mansplaining or like talking over you in any of this sort of stuff, please like just tell me to shut the hell up.
No, I don't mind. I think that the viewers, the audience, can get a lot out of that as well. So for me, it's no problem.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
Don't want to step over any like line or acting.
Absolutely not. Also, it's been so long since I used React that I'm kind of grateful for any help I can get here. So
okay, cool.
Next we have the state. The state can be defined as an object of observable properties or information that controls the behavior of the component and changes over the lifetime of the component. So I wrote it out in plain English down below as well. It's just an object of data that is used or displayed over time by the components on a React page, and the values can change and be manipulated by the component, as opposed to props where they cannot. And I have my state there in blue, Oregon.
Good old
different type of state, but yeah.
Yeah, different sort of state.
So then we have a Venn diagram of props and state. Props, once set, cannot be changed in the component. They only live in the moment. And the state changes over time to control the behavior of a component and should exist throughout the lifetime of the component. But both props and states are data used by the components.
Yeah, I love this Venn diagram. And as Nelson says, thank you. It's a nice explanation for props and states. So
thank you.
Super nice.
Okay, next we have hooks. Nelson, hopefully this will be everything you dreamed it would be.
Here comes the billion questions.
I actually didn't write anything down for this.
That's okay.
Aside from what's on the screen. So basically, before hooks, there was no good way to reuse component logic or reuse like what we would consider traditional methods in JavaScript for functional components. And hooks essentially are a mechanism to access the state. So functional components can only take props as properties, and class components, which I will give a demo of later, have access to the state. But using hooks offers the benefits of state to the functional components as well. I don't know if that's a great explanation, but
so I guess in this it would be like when you're interacting with state in a React component, there's often like you're ending up writing like quite a lot of code just to manage the state within that component, and you might end up writing another component that actually interacts with like similar state or the same state or just reusing a bunch of logic. And previously before hooks, you'd have to basically just manually write that out and deal with the pain. And now with hooks, it's more like the actual management of state in components is drastically reduced. Like the amount of code that you have to write is drastically reduced. You used to have to like when you defined a component that had like state in it, you'd have to like, when the component was created, you have to set up an initial state. When the component changes, you have to deal with how the state is updated. And then when the component, you would then use the state. Whereas now it's like a really simple like function call where you just get state and a method of updating that state, and that's it. Like, it's super simple to deal with it. And then when you're writing custom hooks, it then leads to another much easier way to reuse all of this state management logic that's in your components across all sorts of different components. So you can start using different sorts of state in multiple components without like tying it all together and creating a mess of code.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well said. Okay, section 4. When do we use React? So the context for React is front-end development as a library for building quick, efficient, and visually appealing user interfaces for web and mobile applications, much faster than you could with plain JavaScript. For anyone who's not entirely front-end development just focuses on what the users can, or the user interface, as we said before. And it just involves transforming the code from back-end stuff that you don't see, like the database, to an easy to read and understand format and displaying it. So just to recap of why it's good to use React, or why people use React, is because it's visually appealing. It offers flexibility and custom components. It's efficient and quick to render. It has strong community support, code stability, and easier debugging. It's quick to implement, and it's easy to learn as a bonus. So with that said, here's when we want to use React. If you are working on a front-end user interface that will have high user interaction, like a lot of different components, you'll want to use a framework like React. Coding each one of those interactive elements takes a lot of time, and React takes care of the lower levels of code, which means you only really need to focus on the interface's appearance and some basic functionality. You'll also want to use React if your existing code base is getting out of hand. Writing thousands of lines of code for UI requires discipline, or it's only a matter of time to when the code base has grown too complicated to carry out simple troubleshooting. Also, a slow web page performance is a sign that React could come in handy. The virtual DOM might be overloaded with reloading, so switching to React's virtual DOM could improve performance in that case. And also, as a beginner, when should you use React? I say anytime you want to build a responsive UI, especially as a kind of jumping off point for learning. I think it's a great entry point for learning about front end, and it's easy to set up, pretty easy to troubleshoot, and there are a lot of free online resources for learning. So I don't think you can go wrong starting with React as a beginner. And you would be in good company using React. Some well-known industry examples of its use are Facebook, of course, where it was created. But React has also been used by Netflix, Instagram, Airbnb, BBC, CNN, Reddit, and over 15 million others. Okay, now is the demo, basically. Those slides are backwards, but
No worries.
Yeah, we are right at 1 hour.
Okay.
So I guess the demo can be optional for anyone who wants to stick around.
Yeah. I guess at this point, did you have any other topics that you wanted to cover over, or was it just like the Q&A after this?
Yeah, I only had planned the demo, a Q&A, and then here's some resources for people.
Okay. So I would say at this point, let's show off those resources, and then we can dive in to the demo for people who can stick around for the demo.
Yeah, awesome.
Because I'm sure it'll be useful for some people. And of course, for anyone currently in the meeting who are like, oh, I really want to see the demo, but it's like nearly on the hour and I need to go. Don't worry, this is being recorded. So me and Brittany will organize getting it up on YouTube. And if you are part of the CFE community on Discord, we'll make sure to post links about it and just kind of show it off. which will include the demo as part of this recording.
I don't want to
Great.
interrupt.
I'll just briefly go over the. Oh, no,
No,
go ahead.
I'm not feeling well. So I think I'm going to drop out, but I just wanted to say thank you, Madisen, for doing this. And thank you, Matt, for answering questions. Next time, I hope I will feel better and be able to help more.
Yeah, no worries.
But yeah, I feel better. And thank you for having me.
Of course, you're doing a fantastic job. Everyone seems to be very interactive and getting answers to all the questions they have. So thank you for doing this. And yeah, once the recording is available, I can get it onto YouTube. So yeah.
Great.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to hop off. Have a good night, though.
Have a good night.
Sweet.
Bye.
Get well soon. Alrighty.
So let's dive into
Let's
these
do
resources.
Yes.
Just briefly before the demo. So I always recommend that if you're learning something new, go to the things webpage. In this case, reactjs.org has the official documentation and a getting started kind of list and tutorial of what you need to do from installation to testing. And the tutorial includes a lot of the concepts that I've explained plus more. So that's always a good place to know about. Next, CodePen and Code Sandbox are really good for practicing using your own project, or alternatively, there are a lot of examples already on there from other people that you can explore. And since they're hosted online, it's kind of easy to get started with writing code just by going to their websites. Next, there's freecodecamp.org. There's a lot of tutorials in a lot of different languages. So anything you might want to build, you could probably find the basics for it on there. Next, there's Geeks for Geeks. I love that site because it explains a lot of concepts really, really well for different programming languages. And then, of course, there's YouTube. One of my favorite programming YouTube channels is called The New Boston. They do tutorials that you can follow along. And just YouTube in general has a lot of great resources as well. And I would say pro tip for learning on YouTube is if you want to build, for example, and you're looking for a tutorial, then go for one that has a UI that you like in the thumbnail so that you're actually interested in what you're building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the YouTube tutorial that I used to learn the initial bits of React that I needed, but like a lot of my personal React like knowledge also came from like YouTube and React.js, the reactjs.org, the official documentation. It was some of the documentation was lacking back then because it was like many years ago. But there was I would also do a big thumbs up to some YouTube tutorials, at least at the start, to like get you into the basics. I'd say some YouTube tutorials might get a little opinionated at some point.
So I have one at one end of the spectrum and the other at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you can't go wrong with the React.js documentation, and documentation is always so nice. I love reading documentation.
Me too, but you're right. Sometimes it doesn't accurately, or it always accurately explains, but it sometimes doesn't explain things in plain English. Yeah, helpfully explain.
Yeah, and that's where things like YouTube. Awesome. And hopefully, well, now this video will go on YouTube, and hopefully that will also help even more people.
Hopefully.
Alrighty. I don't see any immediate questions in the chat, so how about we do a demo?
Okay. Fun.
I'm gonna follow along with this. So like I'm a quick typer though, so you don't have to worry about being like taking your time about being slow stuff. So I'm gonna try and follow along, and we'll see if I if I get any errors or something, or if somebody gets any errors, maybe I'll try and help troubleshoot people along the way.
Okay, awesome.
Cool.
This is going to be slightly because I only have one here, so.
That's okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So can you see my screen then?
We can see your screen. It is huge and gigantic, and the terminal is extremely small. So if you could,
I will.
If you could make things bigger, whilst you're like working in like terminals and things, that would be super helpful.
Definitely.
Otherwise, yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Tell me when to stop.
Now is probably when I would say you could stop.
Oh gosh.
Good.
There we go.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. First, I suppose you're going to need to have a few things installed, which I was not planning on going through, actually.
Don't worry about it.
So I'm assuming that you already have NPM installed.
I already do. I guess for people who don't have it installed, if you're running on a Windows machine, you should be able to go to npmjs.com and look at the docs and look at getting started for the is it npmjs? Hang on a second. Install. Oh no, because npm it comes with Node nowadays. So really, you just need Node installed.
Okay.
So install npm Windows. At least for Mac, you can just do brew install npm, or however you want to do it. Or you can just do like a Windows install for it. Let's assume people have npm installed on the machine, because otherwise that's going to take ages. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Okay. So in order to get started with React, it's pretty simple. I actually would like to pull up my slide here, just because after you have npm installed and maybe JavaScript, and I don't know if you need to install React. No, you don't. Just npm. Then you can run these 3 lines in the terminal. So first, npx create React app. My app will create a React app with the name my app. So I'll just do it alongside here. npx create React app, and let's call it
React-workshop.
Yeah, perfect. React Workshop.
Cool. I only say that because that's the app that I just called.
Awesome. And excuse my slow typing. I work on a Swedish computer, and then now I'm home on my American computer, so I get confused with the keyboards.
I have the same thing. My work computer is a Swedish keyboard. My home computer is an English keyboard. So I don't normally have to like look down and type, like my fingers know where they're going. But sometimes I'm like, oh, where's that symbol? And then I look down and I press it. But then when I'm on the Swedish keyboard, the wrong symbol like comes out because it's a Swedish keyboard, but I have my Mac set up to still use the English layout. So it's, I get so confused.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
So what's like, I know the answer to this question, but just for the audience's sake, what's npx? Like, what's this npx create React app thing?
Yeah, if you know the answer, maybe you should take this one.
All right, cool. Okay, so as part of no worries. So as part of the NPM system, so NPM stands for Node Package Manager, and it's basically a way of NPM originally was developed as a way to install and manage packages. So packages could be anything. It could be like the React library. It could be a bunch of scripts to run a bunch of stuff, but it was all intended to be mainly like you wanting to install and manage JavaScript related packages or libraries or dependencies or however you want to describe it. And one of the things that came really popular out of writing NPM stuff was this was writing little like executable packages. So packages that weren't necessarily libraries or frameworks or things that you wanted to pull into your application and then run it. And then run it as part of your application. You just wanted to run a thing. So take, for instance, the Create React app. That is essentially like a little library that exists is part of the NPM like repository registry system. But rather than being a library or something that you would use in an app, it's actually just an executable. So the people who developed NPM included with NPM this thing called NPX, and it is essentially like the node package executor, where executor, like on Windows machines, you get like .exe files. It's files that you'd want to, or things that you want to run. You don't really want to install anything. You don't want to deal with any of that. You just want to run a thing. So NPX, Create React App, in the background, what it's doing is it's actually downloading the Create React App package and then immediately executing it with the then following like arguments of whatever you're providing, the following like properties that you want to provide it. So the Create React App here, this NPX thing, is just a way of executing packages without like in a shorthand way, rather than having to download it and then execute it. That felt like a long explanation for what it actually is.
No, it was
hopefully
good.
That was helpful.
Comprehensive, yeah.
Cool. Nelson says this process takes an eternity for me. I mean, creating the React app, yes, it takes an eternity, but it's doing a lot, as I'm sure we'll see.
We will see. And on my computer, it also takes longer because my computer's super old. So
don't worry about it. It's fine. Mine's only just finished. And from the looks of it, yours is currently going through the installation phase, so yours will be done soon. Hey,
and it's done. So we have created our app. Next, we're going to go into our app. So if I type ls here, we can actually see all of the apps that I've created. But we're going to go into the React Workshop application. And once we're in here, we can run npm start, and this will start the application, and it should pop up in Safari here by itself once it's started. No, maybe not.
Ooh. Takes a...
Wow, live coding is one of the most difficult things to do in live, so well done there, Madisen.
Thank you.
Oh, it's loading it up.
Yep.
It just opened for me as well.
Okay, awesome. And this just launches the application locally.
Yeah. So I think this sets up like a tiny little like sort of test web server type thing. It uses a system called React scripts that essentially like help you like with building like React systems. Yeah, so like running npm start, what that's actually doing in the background is running React scripts start. And what that's doing is, I think, is like creating just a local web server that then helps run lots of things locally. There are alternative systems to use like Webpack and all sorts of other things, but React scripts is a pretty good way to get started.
Yeah. So this is our application right now. It's blank. We're going to do some edits here. So I'm going to open up my editor, and I'm using Visual Studio. And let's get rid of these old things here. And I'm just going to go into React Workshop and then open that up. So we can start looking at the code. And I'm assuming that this text is really small for you guys once it pops up.
Might be, we'll see. Yeah, there's a question from Alex Kirkland in the chat. So is React commonly built using the terminal? Could it also be built in IDEs like IntelliJ?
I think Visual Studio Code, the one I'm using now, is really React friendly. So it can, I think it can be built in Visual Studio Code. I'm not sure about IntelliJ because I haven't used it to program in React.
Okay. So I think you might need a plugin as part of IntelliJ to support like React or at the very least like Node.js related things as part of IntelliJ. JetBrains do, the people who make IntelliJ is a company called JetBrains, and they do have other IDEs. Like there's one called WebStorm, which is actually like a dedicated IDE for like web development. So you could use, but it basically looks and acts very much like IntelliJ, but the sort of built-in things are more focused on front-end development rather than like Java development. But yes, you could build it in an IDE. I suspect most commonly, most people just have like a text editor like VS Code and a terminal, and it's, as we've seen, it's like a couple of commands to create a React app and get started. So it's usually pretty straightforward to get started with the terminal. And I personally would say having a bit of terminal knowledge of how to build and run your applications in a terminal as opposed to only through an IDE is always super useful knowledge to have.
I agree. I prefer to run things in the terminal because it tends to be a bit faster.
Does the terminal host the server then for the React app? So the terminal doesn't, your computer does. The terminal is just the way that you're triggering your computer to host the server, or like you're telling your computer to host the server. A terminal is like, yeah, it's just it's a way to interact with your computer through text rather than through like pretty GUIs, pretty user interfaces. So like I'm pretty sure in VS Code there will be a button where you press like play and it will essentially run all of the processes and things that will start up the server on your computer. It just happens to be that we've done that through a terminal rather than through an application.
Yep.
Hopefully that answers your question, Jonathan. Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, cool. That's good. Sorry, I'm answering a lot of these questions for you.
No, it's great. I think some of these questions I don't know the answers to, so it's actually awesome that you're here to answer them.
Cool. Could you make it a smidge bigger?
Yeah.
Just like a couple of stops up. Hopefully you'll be able to. Ooh, I got bigger.
Is that right?
One more,
bigger.
if you could.
Yeah.
And I think that would then be perfect. That looks perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I thought we could first start off with kind of how to write a custom component with props.
Ooh, yeah.
So I'm just going to import React from React. Okay. Yeah, my computer is really working hard right now.
Indeed. This is what you get for running a server and screen sharing and coding all at the same time.
Right?
I've been through
That's
this pain, so
semicolon.
don't worry about it.
I'm going to import use state as well, because I'm going to do a little state demonstration later.
Cool.
But that's not going to be important for right now.
Okay. Use state. And use state, for people who are watching, is an example of a hook.
Exactly.
It's a hook to be able to do stuff with state in a very simple way.
And I'm just going to comment that out.
Cool.
So for now, we can get rid of this part.
Mm-hmm.
And this part. But I'm keeping the logo because it looks cool.
It does look cool.
So if I save that now after deleting, you'll see that the page automatically should update itself, or the DOM should update.
Indeed.
Woohoo! And
Cool.
the React logo never stops spinning. That's nice.
Indeed.
Okay.
Never stops.
So,
and to explain how I very quickly explain how that happened. The React scripts that's running in the background that we kicked off with our terminal has, like, the server that it's hosting on has a system built into it called hot reloading. And hot reloading is essentially when you change your file, your source code files, and then you press save. If you have the server running with hot reloading, the hot reloading system will detect your file changes and, by the name, reload all of your files into the server and therefore update your application. So that way you can kind of get live, really fast feedback for when you're writing your code, to getting feedback as to oh, it looks like how I want it to look. And it's called hot reloading because a cold reload would be if you shut down the server, changed the code, saved it, started up the server. Whereas a hot reload is, well, the server's still running. The thing that's actually serving this React app is still running. So it's still running hot, and therefore you're reloading it. I think it comes from some engineering term or something, when you leave something running and it's quite hot because it's computers get hot or something. And then I don't know. I might just be making that up. I think I heard that somewhere though.
It sounds accurate.
Cool.
So I've just written a small function here called hello on line 6, and it takes the argument props. And then on line 7, it's going to return a header with the prop name. And how do we get the prop name? Does anyone know?
We have to feed it in, I guess.
Exactly. So in our app, this is what we're going to return here on line 21. We export it, basically.
Yeah.
So we have to specify, or we have to tell the app that we want to include the hello function in the output. So we do that by just writing hello here. And then it's expecting a prop name. So we're going to say name equals friend.
Ooh, you had a little plus there.
Yeah, my Swedish keyboard getting the best of me. Okay. And then we need to end that. Yeah, close the tag.
Cool.
Now, hopefully, we'll be able to see.
Save that.
Hello, friend.
Woo! It says hello, friend.
It says hello, friend. So, any questions?
So, I guess just to show off the reusability of it, create some more components with other words as far as the name, and suddenly you have loads of other headers of things.
Right. So if we just copy this and
mhm.
then like paste it, we can call this one.
Hello, Madison.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Tom. Yeah.
I was going to do Tom and Jerry.
Tom and Jerry. Great references. Cool. And then when we save that, that'll say hello, friend. Hello, Tom. Hello, Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Cool. And so I guess like one of the reusability factors of this is that then you could get to the, because this is all in JavaScript, you can eventually like programmatically create all of these components because it's just JavaScript.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so opening up the floor for some questions. We got a lovely comment from Jonathan saying this is awesome, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Madison or about like any of the React stuff that we've done so far in this demo before Madison shows off this use state bit? Just give it a couple of seconds just to see if anyone writes something in. 4, 3, 2, 1. Nobody's written anything, so I'm assuming you're all React experts by now, thanks to Madison's demo. But we don't know anything about this use state thing. What's
and
that?
And we also don't know much about the state yet. So first I'm going to introduce the state and a little bit about event handlers, which I didn't talk about, but I'm hoping that the demo will be explanation enough.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get rid of these guys. I'll cut this out. So basically I'm going to write a class called hello, and it's going to contain a constructor that houses the state, and then a way to update that state, and a rendering function.
Cool.
Yep. So
yeah. We're going to create a class. So as you're typing this out, I guess I can sort of talk about what you're creating here. So as well as creating functional components, like where you just write function and then the name of your component, and then you return the component that you want to write. You can also create these more kind of complex functions, complex components where they are more than just a function, because they need to contain some stuff. So we do that using the class system, which is built into JavaScript. I think it came in like JavaScript, like ECMA script, like 16 or something, was when classes were introduced. So here we're creating a class called hello, and it's extending, which is like essentially like inheriting lots of features and properties and things from the React.component class. So the I guess it's not technically inheriting because the JavaScript class system doesn't work like other class systems, but it sort of is inheriting. It's like a prototypal inheritance. It's a bit weird. But what we're essentially saying here is we want to create a hello React component called we want to create a React component called hello. So we're creating that as part of the class. And whenever you make a class, you need a way to a class is like a blueprint. It's a way of defining how to create something. So like with a blueprint and you're wanting to go build a house, you're going to need someone to construct that house from the blueprints. And that's exactly what a constructor is for. So as part of this class, hello, that Madison is writing here, we have a constructor that is going to be, whenever we create an instance of our hello component, the first thing that's going to be run is whatever code that is inside of the constructor. And yeah, that's gonna ensure that it's gonna do any initial things that need to be set up for this particular class, for this particular component. And then, so in this case, we've got some stuff about state that I'm assuming Madisen will talk about. Super is just to the super function is a thing that is built into the class system, where because we're inheriting from this React.component, we want to tell the React component, like inherited class that we've got, to also run its constructor. So that's what we're doing when we run super : semicolon, not : semicolon. We're doing bracket semicolon. Be good if I knew what the special characters were. So that's what the super bit's doing. And then we have a render function at the bottom. And I will stop talking about JavaScript classes now and let Madisen chat about state.
Okay, so basically we are constructing a state in the constructor where we say the state contains a message and the message is my friend from state.
Yeah.
So in the header, we're then going to write hello.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to give it a place where we can get the data from the state.
Okay.
And to do that, we're going to say this dot state. Oops, that's a comma. Dot message.
Cool.
So we want the state message, which is here.
Mm-hmm.
But when we click this button on line 26, we're going to want to update that message.
Okay.
And so we're going to do that by using the state. So in order to update the message in the constructor, we need to kind of tell it like this is going to be updated.
Okay.
So this dot update message, which is a function that we're going to write in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now this, oops, I keep doing plus sign instead of equals.
It's okay.
Okay, this looks a little bit confusing, but
bind functions are confusing.
Yeah, but basically what we're saying is that we have an update message, a current update message, which says my friend from state, and we want to replace it with the update message that is going to come from this function. So we're going to bind the new value to the old value.
That's not quite how bind stuff works.
No? Okay, go ahead. That's
okay.
The way I think about it in my head.
That's totally fine. So the one of the problems that the React developers had when they were developing React was, as we're defining now this update message function as part of our class, that is going to actually update the state. It has always been confused about bind and this. So yeah, one of the complex things around the JavaScript class system is that it doesn't really operate like normal class systems like you would find in like Java or C# and things. It's actually all based on like prototypal inheritance rather than class-based inheritance, which I could spend like a month talking about the differences between class-based inheritance and prototypal-based inheritance. But essentially, like, one of the problems that the React developers found is that there's no real easy way to automatically handle including a sort of function in your class to just be part of your class and part of your component. So as part of this React component, we've just defined a update message function that Madisen's just written here that we want to use within our return function, which I suspect is what Madisen's about to write.
Yeah.
And whilst if you did like this update message function and you referenced it in JavaScript, it would look like it should work. It should, when you click it, it should do this dot update message. It should call the update message function for this component. That would be somewhat logical. But the problem is that it's actually underneath in the underlying how React sort of works, like magic. It's actually really hard to have the this dot update message bit that is run on line 30. It's really hard to get that thing to run the function that we've defined on line 20, the update message function, because they're not actually connected in their like underlying component system, and that's what line 17 is for. What it is doing is saying that as part of this class, it's saying this dot update message, which is going to be a function that I am going to define shortly, which is what we do on line 20. I would like to bind this dot update message to this component. I would like to bind this function to this class. And it's sort of a bit of voodoo magic that you need to do to be able to get the functions to work that you're defining. It's rather frustrating, and sort of one of the nice things about using hooks that I'm sure Madisen will get onto in a minute. So I will, so that's kind of how like the bind functions work. The actual thing that does the setting of the state is, and this is where I will hand over to Madisen to chat about the this.set state function and what you've written just now.
So in the update message function on line 20, I wrote this.setState message new friend. So we're going to change the message that is, I guess, shown on line 29 after hello when you click the button. So update message just replaces the old message with the new one.
Cool.
So, moment of truth.
State this. Moment of truth. See if this works. I'm pretty sure it should.
Okay,
all right.
Here we go. We have hello, my friend from state, and a button. And if I click
that's, it should then change to, go on.
Should change to my new friend. There we go.
Hello, new friend from change state. I suspect that's probably because your computer's running a little slow. It took a little while there because your computer's probably running a little slow because you are doing like 5 things at once with that is with all of it.
When I tried this earlier, it was not this slow, I promise.
It's okay. That's what screen recordings do. Always check up your computer.
True.
Jonathan says worked for me too, and I've been too busy asking
Awesome.
questions to follow along, but I suspect it would work for me as well. Cool.
Very cool. Are there any more questions about this state idea?
None that I can see in the chat, and if something comes up, I'll try and answer it either in the chat or whilst we're writing stuff.
Okay. Then there's just one more small demo for hooks.
Cool.
And this one is really short.
Cool.
So
Alrighty.
We're going to do everything in one here. I'm going to make this really simple. Export default function app. just because we can.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to create a const called counter and set counter.
Cool. And this useState thing that we have here is the hook that you've imported.
Exactly. So
Cool.
we're using this hook, and what we're basically saying is that we have a counter.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. And we're using this function set counter to, well, we're going to be counting the number of clicks on a button. But
Just
the counter is going to, oh, go ahead.
Just for my sanity, on line 37 on the useState, is that supposed to be a 0? Because I think it's an O.
It's an O. Oh my goodness, thank you.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a 0. So we're basically saying that the counter is going to be initialized at the number 0. So we're going to count from 0 up. And header. And in this header is where we're going to place our counter. And we do that with some fancy brackets here. And then we're going to have a button where the number is going to increase each time we click on it. So inside this button tag, we're going to include the onClick function.
Cool.
Which basically just says, when you click me, do something that we're going to specify.
Cool.
And it's been so long that I forgot why the onClick function is written like this with the
why it has to be
brackets.
A lambda.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's because the onClick function that you're passing in needs to be a reference to a function. And so like if you did, say, if you just did set counter and then like counter plus 1 or whatever you were about to write, I suspect it's going to be counter equals counter plus 1 or whatever. Yeah. If you just did that, then that is not a function reference. It's you trying to execute a function. And the onClick thing needs to take a reference, not a executed function. So creating it as a lambda means that you're able to, i.e. doing this like brackets with the equals with the arrow, means that it's going to essentially create a reference to a function. It is the concept of a blank function as opposed to you trying to execute a function. It's just the way that like the onClick and the sort of event-based systems work is you need to pass it a reference to functions, not functions themselves, not executing functions themselves.
There we go.
Bit weird, but it's sort of how JavaScript works. But
that was a great explanation. So we're going to reference the set counter function, and we're just going to say the set counter at value n is going to augment by 1 when we click it. So we're going to save this and see if the useState works. Okay, so counter's at 0, and hopefully if I click, it'll go up to 1.
I have a feeling it's not going to.
No? What did I miss?
No. I think what you need to do is do, rather than have n as a lambda n plus 1 inside of the set counter, I think you just need counter plus 1. So because you already have your counter object, which is 0. So if you remove, if you remove,
it worked.
Oh no, it is working. What the? Oh shit! No, because it's set counter. Yeah, because it's a hook. Oh my god, I'm so wrong. I'm so wrong. I was fucking totally mansplaining that.
But we can try it your way.
No, don't try my way. My way's the wrong way. My way's the wrong way. Don't listen to me. Oh, I'm so sorry, Madison. No, you're totally right. Yeah.
It's all good. I was scared because it wasn't working for a second. So I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, it just took a while.
But yeah, and then if we reload the page, the counter will go back to 0.
Yes, because state is only exists as long as the components exist.
Exactly.
And if you reload the page, then all the components are destroyed because you've just reloaded the page. Okay, so why is it a function of the n to the arrow to the n plus 1? Why do you do that? Oh, because when you call set counter, it already has the idea of a counter.
Exactly. So set counter is a built-in function. Yes.
It's a built-in function that we've just defined.
Exactly.
So so when we call set counter, we are going to be doing, like, it already understands that there is a counter that exists. And so we're going to be referencing that as n. And then we're saying we just want to increment it. So we're just going to be doing n plus 1. And the reason why we don't reference the actual counter value, I guess, is because that is read-only. Yeah, it must just be read-only, right?
I think so.
Okay. Cool. Lucas says, so far, React has made me feel like JS is so much harder. The time it's taking to work builds up a funny thrill. Yeah, it's one of those weird things with JavaScript, is that, like...
Well, I'm still amazed for the way that it's working with the n and n plus 1. It should be just counter plus 1.
You might be able to get it with it, counter plus 1. But...
Yeah, let's try it.
I think it's because the n is doing the role of previous state. And yeah, it's just mine.
Is that what
Yeah. Try.
I mean, I was thinking even without even the lambda. So.
Okay.
So you just did.
Like this.
Yeah, I just did that. I wondered whether that would work. So when we save that.
Yep.
And I guess we'll refresh the page in a minute.
Yep.
Hopefully. I don't know whether it's reloaded or not.
Yeah, it did reload.
Cool.
So it totally works.
So it totally worked. Oh, cool. I
think in the previous example that you did, I think the n and the when you are doing this arrow function, the n is doing the role of the previous state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, I think. Now, it was amazing when I saw it working. I felt amazed. Nice. Well done, Madisen.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess in this regard, when we're setting a counter and we're just doing incrementing, using the previous state or using the current state is essentially probably the same thing.
In this case, I think so.
Yeah, because we're just going to be incrementing, because we're starting out at 0 and then we're just adding on 1. But if you did more complex stuff, I guess if you wanted access to the previous state, so in this case, the current state of the counter variable is 8, but the previous state would have been 7. So if you wanted access to the previous state, then you could access that. So I guess like maybe with the previous state, the n function thing, I guess it would be that if you had that and you clicked the button, it wouldn't work initially because it doesn't have previous state. Or maybe it would just use the initial state.
I think in that case, it uses the initial state.
Yeah, it must do. So it achieves the same thing. It just does it in a slightly different way. But that's cool to know.
Yeah, very cool to know. And it seemed like this way with the counter +1 was slightly faster.
Oh, interesting.
And updating. So, yeah.
Don't know. This was super helpful. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, no worries. But yeah, Lucas says, so far React makes me feel like JS is so much harder. The time it's taking to work builds up a funny thrill. Yeah, I think that's kind of sort of the nature of JavaScript, is that once you get used to it, it's actually really easy and quite fun to write. But yeah, like some of the complexities that are built into JavaScript makes it kind of weird. But then I guess a lot of JavaScript developers just be like, nah, languages are weird. We'll just deal with the weirdness and then carry on. Alex says, this has been an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. All props go to Madisen. I'm just here to help. Just want to say kudos. Lovely presentation. Alrighty, Madisen.
Yeah. Thank you guys for the great feedback. I'm glad that you guys were able to get something out of it.
Yeah. Great job, Madisen, using class components and then functional components. Where can I see it all again? Well, if you want to see it all again, you can watch it on YouTube.
Absolutely. And also, if you want the slides, I can put them in the chat.
Ooh, that'd be cool. I guess we'll probably also try and make those slides available in like the YouTube description once a month. I mean, maybe once a week. Like if you join the CFE community, it's like summertime at the moment in Sweden, where lots of people go on holiday, so it might be going through a little dry spell. But if you want to be part of the CFA community, you can join our Discord. I will actually just grab a Discord link to our little community stuff. Invite people. The edit invite link. Max number of uses, no limit. Expire after 7 days. Sure. Copy the link. Okay. So I've just posted the link to our Discord in the chat. If you would like to join, please come and join. We try and put on like little workshops or just like little sessions where we can chat amongst ourselves. We also try and chat in the Discord and help each other out there around coding problems, whatever. Hopefully we'll get more things going on. We currently have a website project that is going a little slow, but that's because we're yet to have that much infrastructure and stuff up in place. Hopefully we'll get some movement on that soon. But yeah, if you want to see all of this again, it'll be put up on YouTube, and please come join our community. Hopefully it'll help you out. And yeah, once again, thank you so much, Madisen, for putting this on. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, really.
Cool. Any final words from yourself, Madisen, before we close off?
Yeah, it was amazing.
Thank you.
Use an example using JavaScript classes. That was very brave from you, and doing it like coding. Amazing.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Cool.
I'm part of the community, and I'm in the Discord, so I'm sure we'll interact again at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Thank you, Matt. Also, you were great. Also,
yeah. Oh, shush! It's not about me. It's Madisen's presentation. Shush. Really appreciate. Lots of lovely comments from everyone. So thank you so much. Before our egos go through the roof, let's finish up and all go have, well, in Sweden, a pleasant evening. if you are elsewhere, such as being in Virginia, in the United States. Have a good rest of your day. Time goes behind. Yes, have a good rest of your day. And hopefully we'll see you on the Discord and maybe in the next session for CFE. So yeah, thanks very much. I'm going to stop the recording now. Bloop.
Oh, can you just give me like 30 seconds?